He'd been working on engines longer than most people had been alive. Old man Clarence was 72, grizzled, quiet, and never missed a morning at his small-town garage in Nevada. His hands were cracked from decades of grease, winters, and busted knuckles. He never complained. Fixing things was all he knew. No assistants, no computers, just a man, a wrench, and the kind of silence that tells you he's seen everything life has to offer and a little more. It was a Monday morning. Dry heat, not a cloud in the sky. Clarence was sipping his coffee when a sleek black Audi pulled up, the kind of machine that didn't belong anywhere near his dusty garage. The driver stepped out. Shades on. Hoodie up. Not flashy, not loud, just quiet, respectful. "Morning, sir," the man said. "My car is making a strange ticking noise near the back. Could you take a look?" Clarence nodded without asking questions. That's how he was. You bring him a problem, he tries to fix it. Didn't matter if you were rich, broke, or invisible. The man waited off to the side. No phone, no attitude, just watched. Clarence took his time running through the diagnostics the old-school way by sound, smell, and instinct. Couple loose pins in the exhaust manifold. Clarence finally said, "I'll fix it. Won't take long." The man pulled out a black card. Clarence raised a hand. "Nah, I'm the house." Seriously. You're the first car I've had all day. Let me do something decent before I croak." The man laughed, a deep familiar laugh, but Clarence didn't place the voice. He drove off 30 minutes later, offering a handshake and a thank you. Clarence went back to his coffee like nothing happened. 3 weeks passed. Dust returned. The town went quiet again. Clarence almost forgot about the guy until that same Audi pulled up again. This time, 2 other vehicles followed behind. One a luxury SUV, the other a plain black sedan. 3 people stepped out. The driver was the same man. But now Clarence noticed the face. Jason Statham, the real one, walking toward him like they had known each other forever. Clarence blinked. "Wait a minute." Yeah," Jason said, smiling. "I was hoping you wouldn't recognize me that day. Wanted to see what people are like when they're not performing for someone." He nodded toward the 2 men behind him, one in a tailored suit, the other holding a file folder thick enough to choke a printer. Clarence looked around confused. "What's all this?" Jason stepped forward. "That day you didn't treat me like a celebrity. You treated me like a man. No strings, no cameras, just kindness. My father was a mechanic. You reminded me of him. He passed before I made it. I never got to do something like this for him." The lawyer handed Clarence the folder. Jason placed a hand on Clarence's shoulder. "As of this morning, this garage is yours. And not just this one, there's now a trust in your name. Fully renovated facility, staff, equipment, retirement insurance. You never have to lift another wrench unless you want to." Clarence opened the folder. His hands shook. The legal documents were real. He stared at the man in front of him, Jason Statham, the movie star, standing there like a son coming home. "But why?" Clarence whispered. "I just fixed your car." "Exactly," Jason replied. "That's the kind of world I want to help build, where people do good for no reason and still get seen for it." Clarence didn't cry, not in front of the cameras they didn't bring. But when he locked the garage that night, he sat in the back office surrounded by papers he barely understood and just stared at the wall for a long, quiet while. The next day, construction truck showed up. Jason was serious. He meant every word. And Clarence, he still came in at 7 a.m. every morning. Still made his coffee the same way. Still rolled up his sleeves, except now he had a team. A brand new sign over the shop read Clarence & Sons EST 2024. And every now and then, Jason drops by, not for car trouble, but just to sit in the back, sip coffee, and talk about engines. Months had passed since Jason Statham's extraordinary gesture had transformed Clarence's life. The small dusty garage that had been his entire world now buzzed with energy. The hum of engines, the clatter of wrenches, and the quiet chatter of apprentices filled the air. The walls, once barren, faded, now bore bright paint, new tools hanging in precise order, and a large sign reading Clarence & Sons EST 2024. Clarence moved through the space like a general surveying his troops, though his hands were still cracked from decades of labor, his knuckles scarred and calloused. Yet now there was pride in his step, a sense of purpose that went far beyond fixing engines. One crisp morning, as sunlight streamed through the open garage doors, a young man lingered hesitantly outside. He looked no older than 20, wearing a hoodie several sizes too big, hands stuffed in his pockets, his eyes darting to every corner of the shiny garage. Clarence paused in the middle of tightening a piston and watched the boy. There was something about him, a mix of uncertainty and quiet desperation that reminded Clarence of himself decades ago. "Can I help you?" Clarence called, his voice calm but commanding. The young man jumped slightly, startled by the sudden attention. I heard you help people," he stammered. "Not just with cars, but I guess with life. I don't really have anywhere else to go." Clarence studied him carefully, the years of experience giving him insight that went beyond the surface. He could see the flicker of potential hidden beneath the boy's nervous demeanor, a spark waiting for guidance. Without another word, Clarence waved him inside. Meanwhile, news of Clarence's generosity had quietly spread through the town and beyond. Jason Statham, true to his promise, continued to visit periodically, not for cars, but to mentor Clarence on how to manage the growing garage and the new trust. That morning, Jason arrived earlier than usual, leaning casually against the counter, holding a thermos of coffee. "Morning," Jason greeted, nodding toward the young man. "You hear about Clarence, right? He's the real deal." The young man's eyes widened. "You know him?" Jason smiled warmly. "I know people who make a difference. And Clarence, he's the gold standard. You're in good hands." Over the following weeks, Clarence took the young man under his wing. He taught him not only the mechanics of engines, but the subtler lessons, patience, respect for craft, and the quiet satisfaction of doing good without expectation. The boy's confidence grew as he learned to tighten bolts, check carburetors, and listen to the unique rhythms of each engine. But more importantly, he learned to value himself and the impact of small acts of integrity. As winter approached, the garage became more than a place of work. It became a refuge. The apprentices shared lunches in the back office, telling stories, joking, and learning not just about cars, but about life. Clarence, who had once spent his mornings alone with coffee and silence, now experienced the warmth of community every single day. Yet, he never lost the humble routine that defined him. He still arrived at 7, still made his coffee the same way, and still rolled up his sleeves, teaching and fixing with the same dedication as always. One evening, as the last light of the sun dipped behind the Nevada mountains, Clarence sat in the back office surrounded by paperwork related to the garage trust. He held a letter that had arrived that afternoon. It was from a national organization dedicated to youth apprenticeships. They had learned of Clarence's story, how a simple act of kindness from a celebrity had not only transformed one man's life, but had created a ripple effect of mentorship and hope. They invited him to speak at a national forum about mentorship, kindness, and the power of paying it forward. Clarence felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief. He had never sought recognition, never imagined himself standing on a stage before an audience of strangers. Yet here he was being asked to share his life and his philosophy with the world. For the first time, he realized that fixing engines had always been about more than machines. It had been about patience, care, and leaving something better than you found it. Months later, standing behind a podium in a brightly lit auditorium, Clarence looked out over the crowd. Among them sat Jason Statham, watching with quiet encouragement. Cameras rolled, but this was not about fame. This was about legacy. Clarence began to speak, his voice steady, but tinged with emotion. Sometimes life hands you a wrench and says, "Fix this." You think it's just a car, just a problem. But every action, every small act of kindness matters. And the people who notice, sometimes they change your world in ways you never imagined. Back in the garage, his young apprentice was meticulously working on a classic engine, applying everything Clarence had taught him. Clarence leaned against a workbench, quietly proud, knowing that the values he had lived by were now being passed on. He realized the world wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about the ripples of kindness and mentorship that could reach farther than he had ever dreamed. And still, every now and then, when the day ended and the last engine was silenced, Jason Statham would show up. He never came with cameras or announcements. He would simply sit in the back office, sip coffee, and talk about engines, about his father, the mechanic he had lost too soon, and about the kind of world he hoped to see. And in those quiet moments, Clarence understood that the true power of kindness was not in grand gestures, but in the ongoing, consistent, humble act of showing up, of being seen, and of passing it on. Life had changed for Clarence, but in the most meaningful ways, it had stayed the same. He was still the man who loved the smell of oil and the rhythm of an engine. Still the one who cherished the quiet satisfaction of work well done. Only now his hands shaped not just machines but the lives of others. And for the first time he felt the full weight and the beauty of a life well lived.